Okay, starting off with the engine, I pulled out the battery and then I started draining the coolant. After I had the coolant drained off, I pulled out the radiator and the overflow tank. Needless to say, I spilled a bit of coolant around the place. I pulled off the bottom rad hose to drain out the radiator, and I removed the windscreen washer bottle as well now. So the next thing I'll be doing now is tightening up a few wires, maybe take off the alternator, air intake, disconnect the fuel, and then the exhaust system, and then once the drive shafts are off, lever out the engine and box together. Okay, the morning has come again, time to start work. Just pulled off all the cables here and I started labeling them up as I go. I don't plan on using any of this wire and loom again. What is interesting on the Mark II type loom is these are all the engine running wires, and they are separate to this part of the loom, which has the alternator and the oil pressure switch and neutral for the gearbox, starter motor, all that kind of stuff, completely separate from two sides, which should make the wiring up of the 1.8T engine a bit easier for me. And we'll keep driving on for now. One thing I did when I was putting the car back together many years ago was I never welded back in the battery tray. I put some bolts on it, nothing too pretty, but I think it's going to be handy this time as I plan on putting the battery into the boot. I'm going to remove this completely. At the time it also facilitated putting the wires down under the battery tray and making them fit, kind of making it look somewhat factory look, I suppose, for the wiring for the headlights and stuff. But that's coming back out now. So I'm after working my way inside the car, trying to remove some of the wiring, and I've come to my ECU that I must have put here 10, 12, 14 years ago, I can't remember exactly. I get a shot of the part number there. It's Bosch to Fagnan 2. Pretty straightforward plugging. Only a few wires needed to get that puppy up and going. And here then I have is my own little method of branching into the loom. So the way I like to do it is keep it separate to the actual car loom itself, although it is integrated from a point it's switched on from the keys. After that then it's totally down to this fella here. What I did notice, let's take off my fuse cover here. You know, if you can see it right there, if it'll focus properly in the camera. I'm pretty sure that's my fuel pump fuse. It ain't blowing, but it's melting away gradually. I gotta check that out. My wiring is a pretty heavy gauge for this guy here, so I don't think that's the problem. Anyway, a little bit of investigation before we go back up and running again. Just out of interest, this is the way I'm running the car. Got a fuel pump relay, a relay for turn on the ECU, and a bunch of fuses with injectors and such. The engine bay is starting to look a little on the bare side now. Got the air intake out, the air mass meter. Got the hoses to the heater matrix out. Got some of the loom out, as you can see. Obviously the battery tray and the rad are gone at this stage. I'm thinking I'll probably take the big brake booster there next. The old servo there. From what I read on the internet, the 1.8 AUM engine won't fit in with a 16 valve Mark II brake servo, which is what's in the car currently. So I think I'll take it out just to make life a bit easier. Time has finally arrived. Time to pull the mill out. I've got my drive shafts off. You see the cups there? Both sides. Exhaust manifold is gone. I don't know, the video footage mightn't be great there. So there's nothing connected at this stage. Gearbox speed fella's gone for the speedo. Fuel gone. everything. So we basically got a bolt at the engine mount in here, bolt at the gearbox mounts. I've got the front mount removed and just the mount down by the, we'll say the gearbox there where the steering rack is. So I'm going to take that out next and start levering the engine out of that, and be trying to fit the new mill then. Okay, I'm kind of more or less engine almost out now at this stage. Just here to take a quick shot of how it fits out easiest. And that's to keep the gearbox back behind the gearbox mount area in the front of the car, if you can see what I'm talking about there. So the engine is kind of a little bit diagonal to the car itself. So there's ample room now to lift the gearbox out without smashing the crap out of the car. So by removing the gearbox mount bracket itself from the gearbox, it creates a lot of space, as you can see. Plenty of room to get the engine out. As you probably notice, I've changed venue for my car now for a while. The other side of the garage is too close to the roller door, so rolling the engine in and out on the hoist would be a bit of a pain in the neck. So I got a lot more space here. One thing I have noticed now that I'm kind of offering up the engine to the Golf, so I can get a quick look at each other there, is my engine mount, or well, gearbox mount. The reverse switch is in the way, so we've got to do a little bit of cutting to fit that on to get a location on the engine. I noticed when offering up the engine into the car there, if it's hanging off the two chains, so the two mount points that's meant to be, the engine's meant to be slung from, the engine tips very much back in this direction. The engine won't fit into the car really comfortably due to the alternator bracket and oil filters, which I could of course take off, but just for dropping it in and out for now, I just want to leave those things attached just to make sure I'm not getting caught and snagged on anything when I'm in there. So what I've done is I put an old ratchet strap here in around one of the bolts in the turbo, and just kind of counteract it just by ratcheting them up and just kind of sitting the engine up a little bit straighter. So now I've got enough clearance, I think, to drop the engine in whole as a unit. So I'll give that a go now and see how I get on. Got the old mill launched in there. It's not sitting in its final resting place by any means. It's just sitting in around there just for a quick idea on what sort of clearance I have. I might have mentioned earlier I was thinking of doing the servo, direct servo brake setup of a Renault. I might do that yet once I get the engine fully settled. It's sitting a little bit high at the minute. As you can see, the inlet manifold is well above the wings, a bit close for comfort there. So the engine should be leaning more forward. Got my gearbox mounts in approximately the right place. Drive shafts are approximate. Again, they should be a bit more forward really. Just giving a quick look there by eye, a little bit more forward. There seems to be plenty of clearance in around here. I've heard people mention alright that the actuator for the turbo is close to the linkage, and it is pretty close there now, but it's not hitting there currently. It's probably difficult to see there in the camera now. I'm just about to make out the pipe of it there. It should be this guy here. So that's okay, not bad for a first fit. So here's the mill sitting in. It's kind of leveled up now. I wouldn't say perfect or anything, but it's getting close to where it's going to be. This is my O2A gearbox side mount. and I had to cut the sides of it off there. Get the camera to focus a bit better there now. The width here is slightly different. It's not much, but it's probably in around like 1.5 mil or thereabouts. But the bracket I had made was quite snug on the gearbox, so that had to come off. Plus, for the reverse light switch as well here, that guy there as well, he was totally fouled up in the bracket I had made, so just cut around him for now. So I've got a bolt shoved through there now. Just 2 bolts on the sides of that mount there. So I'll do a bit of work on that later once I'm happy that it's kind of sitting in the right place. I thought for a while that my O2A gearbox mount wasn't going to cut it. While the bolt pattern was the same, it just didn't seem to want to fit down there for me. But after a bit of messing around and just putting the mount up from under the car, I don't have a lift here, so I suppose not inclined to lie down the ground too much if you can help it. It fitted back up and it bolted in. Now I have it bolted up to the, we'll say, the original Mk1 Golf mount that bolts in the frame that bolts in under the car. So that's sitting there happy enough there now. So the next part now I'm going to go to is the mount at the front of the engine, or the starter mount. That's this guy here. Looking at this initially, first of all, I thought I was snookered that it wasn't just going to fit at all. Everything looked wrong. But again, just after pulling a few pipes out of the way, shifting a few wires and things, all the stuff that had kind of like lying around the engine, it looks like it will fit in. The one difference being the block on the car is threaded for the bolts for the starter. Towards in the Mk1 Golf, Mk2 Golf setup, one of the brackets, the top nut, has a captive nut welded in. And let's see, I get it off there. So it's got the nut welded in, it's threaded, and the bottom one is free for some threads. But with the block threaded, of course, that's not really going to work out, and the studs themselves are too short. But the solution lies in the gearbox you're taking out. So here's the O2A starter motor. These are very, very similar. But what you will notice is this is the O2J starter motor bolt, one of them. And if I line up the O2A beside it, you'll notice straight away that there is a difference in length. And the difference in length is enough for the bracket, but not just the difference in the length. I think get the camera to focus. There's also a difference in the thread size. So one is M10 and one is M12. So the O2J is M12 and the O2A is M10, which of course means the M10 bolts will fit straight through the threads. They won't have to thread through, so there's clearance there enough for it to work. So I'm going to use the O2A bolts to bolt back into starter and the original Mk1 mount back into the car. The starter motor itself, even with the bolts out, is giving it a good tug there now. It doesn't want to fall off. It is fitted fairly snug in around here. There's a machine surfaces. So I don't think by going from 10 to 12 that the starter motor is going to twist or anything with torque or anything. I don't anticipate that being a problem. If it does, it is going to rotate on the center, that the gear turns the flywheel off the motor, if you understand me. So if it does turn a little bit, it's not really going anywhere. It's just going to lean up against the M10 bolts, prevent it from popping out. So I think that will work out nicely. So let's get that started. So I've got the mount in using the O2A bolts. Look in there. Nothing odd, strange to look at. Get my little light to shine in there. Give a bit of luck. It's difficult to picture now. It's really in a tight spot there with the tubing and stuff. Anyway, there she is. Captive nut holding on, and this side over here got like a nut and a washer, and back in here then I do a kind of polybush mounts on the engine side of the car here, on these sides, on the front and back. I think that one could really do with being in a bit further. It is in by about, I suppose, way more than half. But I'd feel a bit more comfortable if it was in a little bit further. I noticed that with the O2A gearbox in as well. This seemed to be a little bit too much of it out. And I had a plate put in behind it for a long time. This plate here, just to space it out about 6-7 millimeters there. Just looks a bit tighter. Might put the plate back in. On the rear gearbox mount, I have it pushed as far forward as it'll go, so the engine is maxed to the front of the car, allowing for the standard mount there. So I'll have to do a little bit of docking to this guy, and the next thing I'm going to do now is start fitting up the engine side mount, which I'm going to throw a few spirit level now around the top of the engine, maybe along the inlet here, something like that, just to see where she's sitting currently. Use some chocks of wood in and build it up to the height that I want. It looks good currently sitting as is. Just do a few checks before I start welding anything up. So this is my engine side mount. So I have access to a lathe. So I turned the body of it to fit in the mount. I made it a nice snuggish fit. It's pressing in really pretty easily. The ring I have in the bottom here is to allow for this guy to it protrudes past the same amount on the far side, so that will accommodate that. Put it up on the far side. It's impossible to have, well, I won't say impossible, but it's difficult to have loads of rings and various bits and pieces for pushing these on, and this is a socket generally works with bearings and stuff, but this is probably a little on the larger side. So what I have here is a bit of 2-inch pipe, just cut and slit, and just open it out, just bend it out basically, and it sits on nice. And you got yourself a nice cheap bearing pusher sleeve. So it's just a case of jack it in, jack her home. That's flush. That's pretty flush looking there. One extra little push. Job done. Getting ready for welding. Initially, I've made this type of thing before, and it's fine to tack weld them up. Even strong enough tack welds while the bushings are in, and then press the bushings back out for the final welding, or the rubber starts melting. You could be, if you're really fast at welding, you could just dump it into a bucket of water, stop the rubber from getting melting up. But of course you do run the risk of the rubber actually lifting off the ring of metal, therefore kind of making your bushing loose in effect. So let's see how we go. I've jacked my car up and took off the wheels and used some axle stands in under the car, both sets the same height. I have my improvised engine lift here, so just use the old D-walt there to jack her up and down nice and handy. In the engine now, it's kind of pretty much set, the position of it, but there is still wiggle room. So I've got some marks on my mount down there, probably difficult to see now with the light. I've marked kind of like the top of it, because as you rotate it, of course, the bolt is not in the center. So I've marked it as best I can. See if I can get the light there. So it's difficult to see it now with the shine of the camera, but I've got a little mark on the timing pulley there, kind of like where the end of it is. Got a black line then drawn along the top, and I've got similar marks left and right marked around. Of course, if you bought the mounts, you wouldn't have any of this kind of hassle, but I'm just making them just to make it harder, I guess. The one thing I do notice is definitely on the old clearance side on the exhaust versus the steering gator, There isn't a whole pile there. Not much you can do. So I'm at the point now where I'm happy enough with the position of the engine. This is the plate I had bolted onto the engine. Made out using like a cardboard cutout stuff. Nothing radical there. A couple of bolts holding her in. Put a small slot in them just to allow for a little bit of movement. No harm. So I've got my mount now spaced up kind of. And as you can see, typically it's kind of like at an angle. So that's the way it has to be. What I did then was I marked it up with a pin. You see the marks there maybe. Light's a little bit scarce. And of course I have my, we'll call it top dead center black line here. So I've got a piece of plasticine on either side of the mount just to hold in position for me. I guess I could try and G-clamp it as well, but every time I try and G-clamp it, it seems to want to roll a little bit left, a little bit right. So I want to keep it as near as I can to where I want it exactly. So that should work out. So the next thing now is shot of the old welder and put it back in after just a couple of tacks. And then once I have it back in, then again take away the engine stand I have under the engine, my adjustable one, that's the car jack thing, and just see where the engine sits. I might need to move the mount up a little bit to allow for a bit of sag. You may notice here I have a poly bush insert into the mount. I only realized yesterday that the mount that I bought is actually for a 1.6 GTI Golf and not the 1.8. So I think one of the maybe the best things to do with it is to just beef it up a little bit there with the poly mount. I had that in the garage lying around anyway from a previous job. So it basically just pushes in and fills up the gaps. So it should stiffen up the mount a bit. So I think it'll make a better job of it. Right, now I've got a small bit of welding to both sides. Just enough to kind of hold the bushing on. And we'll refit that now and see how I get on. So my mount is back in, all bolted up. Everything looked pretty good. I took out my engine stand. This guy here, my homemade jack for lifting the engine up and down. And the engine has sank down a little bit. I'm guessing 4mm thereabouts. It's still sitting pretty level across the tops of the coils, which I found about the only place that's flat on it. It is tipping slightly to the driver's side, so before I re-weld up completely I might just give it a little lift by those couple of millimeters, and that'll straighten out that part. I put my alloy plate back in here, the engine mount here, that's the front one. You can see the plate there, and now you can see that the red bushing is hidden pretty much completely, which is the way I think it should be. So I'm not sure is that probably down to the poly bush really. It is shorter than the standard mount. So the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to prop the gearbox here with my homemade stand and doctor this mount to make it more suitable for purpose. And after that then my engine should be sitting in pretty sweet, and we'll see where we go from there. I think I'm done with the gearbox mount. I've added a bit of a strap piece along the top here, quick run of weld around. So from the top now she looks a bit like this. And from the side you can see I've added a kind of a webbing in the back that wasn't here before. It's kind of a triangular piece really, straighten it all up. And I'm using the standard bolts in both locations. Build them there, and the one in the top there is for an air strap. So in from the front end, it looks like an L. So a shot of paint now should clean it up nicely. I've got plenty of material up underneath there. Hold on the ring holding the bushing. I don't think there's any need to add any extra material here. Well, probably no harm. I won't do it yet. I don't think it's actually necessary at all. So, another bit done.